Hey, YouTube. Gonna give it a moment, just a moment to see if anybody is around to catch the live before I start talking. For real. Baby Joy Chaser is at school, at daycare, and baby sister is in this pack and play next to me in the bassinet part napping. So I'm trying to talk without being too loud. Okay, I see somebody's watching, a couple of you. Hi. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I was just going to say I'm trying to talk loud enough for the video, but not so loud as to wake her up. Because I hopefully can do this in one video so I don't have to go back and like edit it together. But so let me know in the chat, in the live chat, if you guys can hear me, if I'm talking loud enough. So this video is my labor and delivery story. Um, the last video I posted was the vlog. So if you want to go and see like not live action, but see what I was recording as it went on and like my thoughts in the moment, you can go back and check that out. Or for now, I'm just going to talk about things before I forget because baby sister is already over a month old. She's a month old this week and she'll be 5 weeks on Sunday. So I need to get my story out before I forget things because nature really is amazing in that you do start to actually forget stuff. um, but anyway, before I go into the story, I am going to say trigger warning. This was another traumatic birth experience for me. Um, the baby is here and healthy. I am here and healthy. So it all worked out, but I definitely um, thought that I might die. And I did not have that experience before. Um, so if you are pregnant and you are looking for a 37-week labor and delivery video, um, that is a all around good story, then skip this one. Come back, check it out after you've had your baby. Or if you're prone to anxiety and pregnant, skip my video for now and come back after you've had your nice uneventful delivery and hear my story. But like I said, the positive is we made it to the other side and all is well now. But it definitely, you know, I definitely have some disappointments um, that I'll get to. But just wanted to give that trigger warning that if you're looking for like positive, upbeat stories, to skip this one. This one's not going to be it, unfortunately, and I don't want to traumatize anybody or make anybody who's about to be induced at 37 weeks, be freaking out. So anyway, so this pregnancy was my second pregnancy um, from IVF. This baby is the same from the same IVF as my son, and getting pregnant went super smoothly. I was shocked. It got pregnant the first try, first transfer with her. Found out it was a girl, and I want to say almost from that, not quite that, but right a little bit before the gender reveal on, it was kind of stressful. So I got diagnosed with the gestational diabetes, and that was stressful. Um, Known as like to monitor my food and all that. And then we had come down with COVID, me and my son, in January. So that made me be worried and stressed, but got over that pretty uneventfully. Felt like a bad cold that just stayed for like 3 weeks. So that was annoying. But Then we had the gender reveal, and if you go check my videos, my paperwork got messed up, said I was having triplets, so then that was stressful. And then not long after that, my doctor's appointment started being stressful. My blood pressure was creeping up. This doctors were scaring me about what that could mean. Then I started my non-stress tests, which for Baby Joy Chaser were pretty uneventful. With her, every single stress test became a stress test and not a non-stress test. Her heart rate never rose how they wanted. She never showed up on their monitors how they wanted, and it was just awful. Like I started having anxiety before every doctor's appointment, which didn't help the blood pressure. And then I would go to other doctor's appointments, like my cardiologist, and my blood pressure would be fine. So at some point, they when the blood pressure, once I had two readings that were high, they told me that if I got diagnosed with gestational hypertension, I would be delivered at 37 weeks. So I had already told you guys that even though I was stressed while I was pregnant, getting induced at 37 weeks, I was feeling was going to be a blessing in disguise because if you watch my previous labor and delivery story for Baby Joy Chaser, he got stuff coming out. He had what they call shoulder dystocia, where his head came out, but then the rest of his body was stuck inside me around the shoulders. And he could have died, but they did a whole bunch of maneuvers on me. Well, not a bunch. They did one very intense maneuver on me, and I know what was going on, and they got him out. And he was perfect, other than a lumpy head. But it could have went a whole nother way. He could have died. He could have had his shoulder broken. He could have had his shoulder dislocated. He could have permanent damage in his shoulder or neck from the nerves being damaged. And we were so blessed. Nothing happened. He's perfect. So, and then after that, I hemorrhaged with him. But they gave me a shot and everything was good. So I see like 5 people watching. Somebody let me know in the comments. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm assuming you can because nobody has said we can't hear you. Also, it's nice to know who's watching, so just say hi. So I know I'm not talking to myself. So because of all that happened with Baby Joy Chaser, and he was born at 39 weeks and 4 days. I really didn't want to go to 39 weeks with this baby. I wanted to go and be induced at 38. I figured 1 week sooner would hopefully make a smaller baby, less likely to get stuck. Plus, I'm like, all right, 37 weeks is technically full term, but it's like barely full term, where 38 weeks felt safer. So being induced, so I was thinking like, okay, this hypertension, which is what I end up being diagnosed with, gestational hypertension, might be the blessing in disguise to let me get induced earlier, because they were not going to induce me earlier just for the gestational. So they had told me if I went back in for my appointment that was on my 37 week exactly, that if I had high blood pressure, they were just going to induce me. So told my cousin, and so she said, okay, she would come with me. So we went to the appointment prepared, bags packed, right? And that morning, I had went to my nephew's graduation. It was a little bit of walking around. It was hot and low key. I was like, okay, maybe this walking around is good because if I get induced later today, hopefully this walking will help things move quicker. That did not happen. But anyway, went to the graduation. From there, we went got something to eat at Golden Corral. I only had one plate of food. It's a buffet. I did not get more than one plate because I didn't have time because I had to get to the appointment. So I didn't eat much food um, that day. Which hindsight, I should have made sure I ate. So if you're going to be induced, make sure you eat a good amount before you go. So after I eat, go home, my cousin comes to my house, picks me up. I had a whole plan of my brother and sister-in-law were going to pick up Baby Joy Chaser from daycare. I left my car parked, but I left them with the spare key. So if I did get induced, they could come and get my car. That way they had 2 cars. Um, if in case they needed to, like, one of them needed to be somewhere else while the other needed to take him to school. Um, his bags were already packed and at their house. So in the car, I just had a few last minute things that he would need, like his night light. things that I couldn't take ahead of time. So everything is ready to go. And at this point, the graduation is done because that was my main concern. If you remember from my videos, I didn't want to inconvenience my brother and sister-in-law too much by having them have to look after my son during their son's high school graduation. Everybody waits all those years for your kid to graduate high school, so I didn't want to interfere with that. But now that I knew the graduation was that morning, I actually got to go. I was like, bet I'm just ready to have this baby now because they're stressing me out so much at these doctor's appointments. I felt like I couldn't take it. Like I'm getting so anxious that it was getting bad. Um, so go to the appointment. I go in the back. Well, I go into the room. My cousin waits out in the lobby. My blood pressure was 160 something. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then I panicked because I'm like, that's too high. It only needed to be above 140 for them to say it's high. And it was like 160 something. So they're like, okay, we're going to induce you. So the only thing they did, they checked the heartbeat. I think they checked it. She was fine. And then they're like, all right, we're going to send you over. So 2 days before that, I had an ultrasound and she was estimated at 7 pounds and 1 ounce, I think, at that ultrasound. So I'm like, okay, hopefully nice 7 pound baby. So we go to the hospital and it was different than before. So before, I guess because with baby Joy Chaser, he was scheduled. My room and everything was ready. It was like easy registration in room. This time I couldn't go. I went to registration and they had to send me to triage first. So then I got triaged. I'm sitting there waiting. That bed was uncomfortable there for maybe an hour for finally there was a room available. So then they got me in the room. Then I had to wait a bit more. Finally, um, nurses and stuff came. So my appointment was at 2. By the time I got in the room and they were ready to start things, it was after 6. And my doctor, I don't remember who was on duty that day, was gone. So if you remember from my videos, at my practice, they have you see different partners each time, whether it's the midwives or the doctors, so that when you go into labor, the idea is you will not be delivering with the doctor you never met. Spoiler alert, I ended up delivering with a doctor I never met. So anyway, Friday, and all this was on a Friday. So by the time they were ready to get started, it was like 6 o'clock. My doctor had already was gone, and no one came to replace her from the practice for the evening, which was different from when I had my son. When I had my son, there was always a doctor from the practice there throughout the whole weekend. So these doctors I didn't know come in. They were all very nice, and they explained they were going to put in the Foley bulb or Foley balloon and Cytotec. And the Cytotec is a drug which is supposed to like soften the cervix, and then the balloon would expand, and they could put it in, and then they fill it, and then it weighs down in your cervix, and once it'll help your cervix open to 3 centimeters, and then it will fall out. So they put it in. I remember that being kind of painful, but not as bad as I was anticipating. I didn't have that Foley ball or bulb with Baby Joy Chaser, but I'd heard about it from other people's videos. So she's trying to get it in. And then how about she's like, well, I got it in and it fell out. So I had immediately dilated to 3 centimeters. So I'm like, yes. I'm so happy in that moment. Like, yes, this is going to be fast because my whole thing is I wanted the induction to take 1 day instead of 2. I knew I wasn't going to be lucky. Like a friend of mine, her induction was like hours long. I knew that that wasn't going to be likely, but I'm like, if it could be just 1 day, that would be better. I was so anxious about being away from Baby Joy Chaser, and I just wanted to be able to get back home as soon as possible with the new baby. So when I dilated to 3 immediately, I'm like, bet this is gonna be good. It's gonna go smooth. Obviously I have been praying for things to go smooth. Um, so they were like, all right. So then they didn't bother to do the cytotech because they would put that in vaginally. They said, well, you're already open. It would just fall out. So I'm like, okay. So they said, well, we'll start the pitocin. Um, oh, so before they started the pitocin, now I'm starting to already forget things. So definitely go check out the vlog. At some point, they let me eat dinner. So I think that was before they put I think it was while I was waiting for them to get the Foley ball stuff ready. And so my cousin went and got me like some chicken. It was kind of like buffalo wings and macaroni, cheese, and vegetables from the cafeteria. And that was pretty good. Not the greatest, but decent enough. But considering I hadn't eaten hardly anything else of like one plate of food, which wasn't that significant, it was cabbage and some kind of roast beef and some potatoes. Um, so not a whole lot of food for that day. And I had had a protein shake earlier, a protein drink earlier. Um, so not super filling, but I'm like, bet by when I dilated 3 centimeters immediately, I'm thinking this is gonna be quick. It don't even matter what I've eaten because it's gonna be fast. So they start the pitocin and they start and then they crank it up. I think one thing every 30 minutes, and in Mexico is 30. So they start the pitocin and it's going, and I'm not feeling anything at first. And then, they checked me and I was not making any progress. I stayed at 3. I feel like for the longest time, and they were like, well, maybe 4. And then I started having some pain, not a lot of pain, but it was starting to get late and I was tired and I wasn't able to sleep because the beds aren't that comfortable. And then they always come in and check on you, and then they're doing my blood sugars and whatnot. And so I said, well, let me get the epidural because I had seen plenty of people's videos where they get the epidural and then they fall asleep. And while they're asleep, their body does the miraculous stuff and they dilate and then that's a wrap. So I'm thinking that's what's going to happen to me. So I get the epidural and it, um, takes the pain away and I'm trying to rest. Now getting the epidural was awful. Now I'd had one before, baby joy chaser, and for whatever reason, it hurt this time. Like I remember they would say like, "Oh, a pinch and like a burn or whatever," but like I could feel on my lower back on the left side, like near my hip. I could almost like feel the I don't even know what it's called, whatever the medicine is, kind of going through, I guess, that part of my spine or my back, and it kind of hurt. It was like very, not like sharp pain, but very uncomfortable, like almost like a cramping. And that's the exact spot that I remember being in labor with baby joy chaser that never really got numb, where it was wearing off. So I was like, oh man, it was so intense. And I felt like it took long and it was just a lot. Like it was like, oh my gosh, like that was awful. So I was glad when it was in, like cool, bet everything is now I can get some sleep, and when I wake up, I'm gonna be all dilated. So I go to, I try to rest, and as much as you can when they come in to check you regularly. Um, and I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic all the way, to the next morning, and they checked me, and I was 4. I think 4 or 4.5. Like basically nothing happened. Like 1 centimeter all that night. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like 12 hours and like one. Like that's slower than even with Baby Joy Chaser, I felt like. And the epidural was now, hey Rachel Faith, how's my audio? I'm assuming it's okay since no one said anything. I'm trying to not talk too loud to wake the baby. So they're like bothering me. So, I'm getting as much rest as I can because they come in, checking and everything. So, before I forget, there were two ways that I advocated for myself during my labor and delivery and postpartum. So the first way is I asked them if I could check my own blood sugars because I remembered from before um, that the needle that they used in the hospital hurts. So when you have to check your blood pressure, your blood sugars, you have to prick your finger, and you guys, if you most people have had a finger prick test at some point. It hurts. It hurts more than giving blood, and especially if you do like the ball or the tip of your finger, because we have all these nerve endings, right, to help us, pick up things to write and all that stuff. So when you go through the training, when you're diabetic, regular or gestational, they recommend you prick your finger on the side, like over here, because you have less nerve endings on the side. But for some reason, the nurses who do this regularly don't get that training, and they stab you right in the middle of your finger, and it hurts a lot. So I asked every nurse that came on duty if they mind if I pricked my finger myself, and I've had my own the little finger prick thing, and all of them said okay. I thought they were going to say no and push back, but they were like, sure, whatever you need to do. And I was so happy that I asked to do that myself because it was way less painful for me to do it myself, and no one gave me any pushback. So just in case you're wondering, or if that's your situation, you can ask to do it yourself. And I guess it's just a lesson. Sometimes the things we think we're going to get pushback on, we don't. So, but anyway, they still are coming to check it every. I want to say they were checking it like every hour or two while I was on the epidural. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It was every 4 hours, and then once you were considered in active labor, it was once an hour. But I didn't get into active labor for some time. So anyway, all next morning, only to like 4.5. So then one of my doctors, the doctors from the practice was on duty. And I was like, yes. And then I kind of relaxed a little bit, like, okay, familiar face, someone who kind of, and who knows my history. Because the last thing that I discussed before I left my appointment and went to the induction, and also in my previous appointment, was the fact that I had hemorrhaged with baby Joy Chaser, and at my 6 week postpartum from that pregnancy, the doctor who has since retired from the practice and who I learned had founded the practice told me there were things they could do during labor to be prepared for that. So I'm like, okay, yes. So a doctor from my practice who knows my history, because everyone else I have to keep redoing my history every time a new doctor comes on. They gave me two IVs. I had to have one. Normally you have one, but because I have this hemorrhaging risk, I had to have two IVs in one hand, which that was very uncomfortable. But that's just in case I did hemorrhage badly and they needed to give me blood. They didn't want to have to run a whole new line for that, or if they had to give me special medicine. So, we're being cautious, and I'm like, okay, even though it's annoying, whatever we have to do to be safe, I want to do it. But anyway, I'm relieved my doctor was there, and she's like, okay, and she was on duty, supposed to be until 6 that night. So she's like, so hopefully I'll be, I should be the one delivering the baby. So I'm like, okay, great. So I'm like, okay. So as the hours are going, I'm like, for the most part, it's just kind of boring, right? Because I have the epidural. It's not really hurting. You just kind of stiff. The only thing that hurt, well, I would say, well, not hurt, but uncomfortable, is when you're on the epidural, they have to empty your bladder by putting in a catheter. Now, my friend who has had C-section said, guess they put a permanent catheter in. It stays in until you're done, I guess, because it's a surgery. But with the epidural, and you're not having a C-section, they just put a temporary catheter in just to clear the urine. And I hated that. And it was so uncomfortable. It wasn't painful, but I could feel it. And I kept thinking, why am I don't understand, why am I feeling this? I thought this epidural was supposed to make you numb completely. But I could feel that. And I do vaguely remember feeling that a little bit with Baby Toy Chaser. But it was an odd feeling in that it felt uncomfortable, but I wasn't feeling it fully because when they would take the catheter out, I couldn't tell. It would still feel uncomfortable for another minute or so after because I'd be like, "Are you done?" And they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, it's out." But it would still feel uncomfortable. But I hated that. I hated that catheter so much. So most of the time you're just bored, hoping and dilating, and then being annoyed whenever they have to empty the catheter. And then when they would check me, I was not making any progress. And I was getting a little sad because I'm like, okay, that means I'm here another day. And I'm video chatting with Baby Joy Chaser. And like that first night, I could tell he was so sad. And then I felt like, oh my gosh, like I wanted to cry. And I managed to keep it together. We did like a video. We read a book using that Facebook portal. Somebody gave me that for Christmas. And it actually lets you become the cartoon character. So we read a Pete the Cat book. And that really cheered him up. And then the next day, that day, Saturday, he was at a party. So I'm like, okay, he'll be busy all this day. But by the time I'm talking to him in the evening, I've still not made any progress. So I was hoping to have had the baby on Saturday and be able to be like, okay, I'm coming home, in another couple days. But it wasn't the case. So I was getting bummed out just by it taking long. But for the most part, I was still like, the baby was doing great. Like she never was showing any signs of stress. She even, and my contractions were happening, but they were never in a good rhythm. They were just kind of like not rant, like they're regular, but not like maybe like this one was a minute, this one was 2 minutes. Here's one is 3 minutes. Here's one is 2 minutes. So it wasn't like a consistent rhythm, even though they were regular. So eventually, as it starts to be later Saturday night, I'm like feeling these contractions, and I'm like, what's happening? Like, okay, I'm like, okay, it's wearing off. And I remember Baby Joy Chaser was wearing off in one spot. This was a different spot. Like I was feeling pressure in um like my vagina. I think that's what I was feeling. Like just kind of discomfort, and it wasn't like with him it was like lower back pain. I remember specifically. This was more like just a general like I'm hurting a little bit and uncomfortable. So I'm like, okay, this is wearing off. And so oh, when it was like cramping in the front, that's what it was. It was like cramping in the front. And I'm like, okay. So I tell them like I think this is wearing off. And they're like, okay, do you want us to call the anesthesiologist? She can give you what they call a bolus, which is where they put. So basically, when you get the epidural, they put a. I'm just gonna call it a shot. They put a big shot of the numbing medication in, and then you're on a drip that is like a small increments that just kind of maintains it. And you can push a button to give you a little extra from the drip. And I was doing that and nothing was happening. So when they're like, we can have the anesthesiologist come back and do another bolus, that just means put another big shot through the same epidural line that you already having. So I said, yeah, I want to do that because I don't want this to get worse. Because now we're into the second night. It's over 24 hours now. And I am tired. I don't want to get too tired. Plus, my cousin is there with me. She's not a fan of blood and gore and all this stuff. She's literally just there as my supporter and the godmother of the children. Some people like, oh, I want to be at the birth. She is not that kind of person. Like when I asked her, I was like, are you up for doing it again? And she's like, yeah. I was like, you can think about it. She's like, no, no, I can do it. But this is like not her thing. So I don't want to traumatize her. I don't want to be feeling pain. I want to rest. So I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Give me the bolus. So anesthesiologist comes, great anesthesiologist. So we end up, she's putting it in, giving me the medicine, the bolus or whatever, and we're chatting. Somehow it comes up that I use a sperm donor. Come to find out, she's using my same exact fertility clinic and the same doctor. Like, so what's such a coincidence? And unfortunately, I don't share that publicly, but it was like such a coincidence because she was asked me something. She was like, "You don't mind If I ask you this, I'm asking because I'm going through this now. And you guys know I'm open book. So told her, oh, whatever she was asking that I don't remember now. And, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my doctor too. And I was like, if you don't mind me asking, who's your doctor? And she told me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was my doctor. He's really good and all this stuff. So nice bonding moment with this anesthesiologist. So I'm feeling good now. Like, okay, this pain gonna be going away. Everything gonna be going smoothly. So she leaves, and the nurse is there because they'll stay with you for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes after you get the epidural. So then I'm like, I am still hurting. And then I'm like, that was a contraction, right? And she's like, oh yeah, she could see it. And I'm like, these are hurting more. And like I'm now feeling every contraction. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And so she's like, at first, make it seem like she's like, well, are you sure when I gave you the bolus, you shouldn't be feeling it? And I'm like, but I am, And so kind of like questioning me a little bit. Not like drilling, like, are you sure? But she was just like, that's really strange. And she said, okay, let's do the ice test. So she gets a glove and she has ice in it, and they put it on they start on your lower body, and they like work their way up with the ice. And you tell them, no, I'm sorry, they start at your arm, and they say, okay, and they'll tell me how does it feel? Does it feel cold? Is it as cold as your arm? And they work their way up. So I started feeling this thing at like my hip. I'm like, it's cold. I feel it. It's not as cold as my arm, but I definitely feel it. And then it got to like my waist. I'm like, it's as cold as my arm. So she's like, okay, it's clear, definitely wearing off. So she said, let's call the anesthesiologist back to explain. She comes back. She's like, this is so weird. Let me see what's going on. Then she says, well, let me check your line. They've been checking it, right? And I'm like, what? Nope. What do you mean checking it? She's like, yeah, someone's supposed to be checked to check your epidural line every 4 hours. So I was like, no, no one has checked it since it was put in. Somehow that whole epidural had come out of my back. Um, I'm not gonna say somehow. It had come out, I think, because I was having hot flashes on and off. So I would sweat and then I would get cold. So I think me sweating loosened up the tape, that it's taped because it's taped down once it's in place. And me them maneuvering me to check me, and helping me like scooch up, scooch down, because you can't really lift yourself well. It had managed to come out. So when I hear this, I am upset. And she's like, okay, well, do you want us to put it back in? Now, I told y'all putting the epidural in was bad this time. Like it hurt and it was intense. Much more so than with baby Joy Chaser. So I'm thinking, I don't want to do that again. Like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I've never heard of this happening to anyone else. And I'm just like, how could this, like, how could no one check? I wish I would have known. So consider this your public service announcement, and please share with any and all friends who plan to get an epidural. If you get an epidural, it should be checked every 4 hours. So if no one is checking it, you make sure you check it. You ask them to check it. So you don't have to go through this. So I agree, but I'm upset. Like I am trying not to cry. I'm so upset about having to do this again. Plus, it's just stressful to get epidural. They're messing with your spine. Like it's not a fun thing. So we do it. It gets in. It's just as bad. It's just as painful and intense as the first time. And the first time that day. And so it's finally in. And I'm like, okay, relief. Now, mind you, my cousin was asleep through that part. So, because now it's like maybe 1 in the morning or something, Saturday night. Mind you, I got there around between 3 and 4 on Friday afternoon. So we're like 36 hours in, or almost 36 hours in. So she's asleep. So she doesn't even know that this is happening. She wakes up when they're about to actually put the epidural in because they had to have her move to the other side of the room because they don't want someone to be watching and like pass out. So, by the way, please thumbs up the video, those of you who are watching, and you can drop your comments and your questions in, even though I'm kind of telling a story. If you guys have questions that'll help me in case I'm forgetting anything or anything that just is interesting to the viewer. But anyway, please thumbs up the video while you're watching. So the epidural's put in. They put another bolus in, and then they have to lay you flat because they want the medication to go be even on your left and your right side of the body. So they lay me flat, so I'm laying there. And I'm just trying to calm down. And the nurses with me, all the nurses were really good, despite them not checking my back. They were all really, really, really nice, really attentive, and um, I never felt abandoned by the nurses. So she's talking to me, and then she's like, "Okay, we're gonna do the ice test thing again." So she gets another glove, and she does my arm. I think it's cold. But then she starts coming up, and I'm like, we get to like my hip, and I don't feel anything. I'm like, great, it's working. And don't feel anything, don't feel anything. And then she gets to like my upper abdomen, I don't feel anything. And then she gets to like my boobs area, and I don't feel anything. And she's like at my chest, and I don't feel anything. And then I realize like I am numb almost through my whole body. So I start panicking. Now I feel like I can't breathe because I'm trying to inhale. And she's like, okay, let's sit you up. So they sit me up real fast. My blood pressure starts plummeting. I get nauseous. I think it was like 60 over something. Uh-oh. Baby sister's waking up. All right. Let's see if she's waking up for real. She cries a little bit in her sleep sometime and then stays asleep. Um, so I'm panicking and I'm thinking I'm gonna die. Oh my gosh, like I really thought I was gonna die. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. I am one of those, I'm gonna be a statistic. I'm gonna be one of those black women who goes for routine labor and dies. Like they have numbed me to death. Like this is what I'm thinking. And the nurse is like rubbing my arm. She's like, just stay calm. She's like, you're breathing. And she's showing me on the monitor, like, look, here's your oxygen. Your oxygen is good. But I can't feel it. So I'm inhaling, but it doesn't feel like I'm inhaling because I'm numb. And so I hear what she's saying and I see what she's showing me on the monitors that my oxygen is good, but all I know is I don't feel like I can catch my breath. And so now I'm crying. Like real tears, like I'm crying and I'm just thinking I'm going to die. And I'm thinking about my son, like, oh my gosh. And like once I had him and was going for a second baby, that was always in my mind because I mean we know that women do die in childbirth. Like it's rare compared to, 100 years ago or whatever, but it happens. So, you just want to go in, get out, and that's one reason why even considering what happened, I personally would never do a home birth because I want people there to help me if something goes wrong because it's just a risk. So but I'm really thinking like I'm gonna die. So they stopped the epidural altogether. They shut it down. They didn't take it out, but they like shut the thing down. So I'm not getting any more medicine. They send up. She's like, hey, it's just gonna take a little time to wear off. But she's like, but you're breathing. So they get the endocrinologist comes back. I mean the endocrinologist, the anesthesiologist comes back. She's trying to calm me down. And how about at this point, there's nobody there for my practice. My doctor had been there, had got off in the evening, and there was no one there for my practice. So still now doctors that I never met before. They were good doctors, nice, but no one there. So they put an oxygen thing on me. um, yeah, they put oxygen on me, and then they just have me sit there like seated up with the bed position like a more like a chair than a bed. and just waiting for this epidural to wear off. And finally, it started to wear off, and I was less numb, and I felt like I could breathe. And that is one of the most terrifying things that I have ever experienced in my life. I don't ever really remember thinking that I was going to die before, but I really felt that. And it was awful. And the main thing I was thinking that I was that I was going to leave baby J Chaser. Like, oh my gosh, like they're killing me. Like they actually killed me. I'm going to die. And I left. It was awful. I was so upset. Um, and Rachel Faith, I did see your question about a doula. So I had never planned to have a labor doula. I had planned and had like an interview with a postpartum doula because I knew that I was getting the epidural. So I didn't, I mean, I know some people use the doula for other things. So now I know you can have your doula check make sure your epidural line doesn't come out. But I knew I wasn't going to be laboring without medication where I would need a doula support for that. And my cousin was going to be there, and I've been through this before. So I never really planned to have the doula in the delivery room. It was more for postpartum. But once my aunt told me that she was going to come and stay with me, then I decided maybe I don't need to do it. And then the girl who I had interviewed with, she never called me back. Like I didn't call her back either, in full transparency. But when we talked about the postpartum time, she was saying she was taking some courses, and so she would have a better idea of her schedule to know of her availability once it was further into the year, into the new year, because I think we talked around January, and she was supposed to get back to me once she got her courses, and she never got back to me. And by then my aunt said she could was going to come, and so I just said, okay, well, I'll just save the money for the doula because that was going to be like thousands of dollars. um so yeah, so no doula. um Course correction says that sounds traumatic. Glad for sharing this. Yes, it was very traumatic. And for those who are watching the video now, I did do a trigger warning in the beginning, because this is not a video for somebody who wants only happy stories because they're looking for peace of mind. This is a video for someone who wants to know like a realistic experience. And now they know to make sure someone is checking your epidural, that it stays in place. So anyway, it finally starts to wear off, and now I can feel my contractions again. And so now it's like, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to go through the rest of this labor without the epidural? Because these contractions already hurt a little bit, and they at this point they're telling me I'm still not considered to be in full labor. Um, so I'm just like, I don't even know. But I was like, well, can we turn the epidural on a little bit? So they said, well, I don't think so, but let's call the anesthesiologist back. So she comes back again. And so she's explaining that there is no like little bit, that the way that it works, about them put that bolus through, which is the big chunk of medicine, which is what they put through that numbed me too much. And then it's just a drip. So if you don't have that drip on steady, it doesn't maintain the level of numbness that you're at. And then you run a risk of needing another bolus, which then could make me over numb again. So she was like, we don't want to do that again. She was like, so the best bet is to just put the drip on and you just stay at where you are. So I agreed. And by the way, that I know that anesthesiologists, like, I'm gonna say chewed them out. Though I don't think that's the right term, but I know she had strong words for the nursing staff because they were supposed to check that. And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion on just mistakes in the workplace. So if one of the nurses, say the first nurse didn't check, but then the other nurses did check, then I would have been like, oh, that first nurse didn't know what she was doing. And I'd have been upset with that first nurse. I had by that time at least 3 or 4 different nurses, and not a single one of them checked my epidural. So to me, that means that's a systemic issue that these nurses are not being told that that's what they're supposed to do, or they're not routinely checked on it or reminded there's a systemic issue with the hospital or the staff in general. So that's not something from where I'm mad at any particular nurse. I'm just mad that that happened, and as a whole they should be doing better. So that's why I still felt like I appreciated the nurses and what they were doing, because clearly if none of them checked, then somebody didn't tell them they were supposed to, because they were doing everything else right, and they were being attentive and staying with me, and I saw more of the nurses than any doctor. um, so rewind a little bit. So on Saturday, I skipped this part. On Saturday morning, when one of my doctors did come back on duty and saw that I had made no real progress, she said, oh, they probably, actually, a nurse said it first, but then to me, but then my doctor ended up saying it to me, independent of the nurse. Oh, they probably still should have gave you the Cytotec even though you dilated to 3, because they could have just gave it to you in your mouth and it would have done the same thing. Probably taken longer or maybe a little less effective, but it would have still helped to soften the cervix. She said, because sometimes if you've had a baby already, just them putting it in will manually make the cervix open, but it really won't soften it enough to keep opening on its own. So they really still should have given me the Cytotec. So I really think that's where everything kind of went south and why it took so long. That they should have just stuck with the original plan, and when they couldn't put the Cytotec in my vagina because I had already dilated from putting the ball in, they should have given it to me in my mouth. So when my doctor from my practice was on, she actually stopped the original induction. Like, she turned the Pitocin off. They gave me a break. They said I could eat. I forgot all this part, y'all. They said this is all before I thought I was going to die. Sorry. They said I could eat and everything, and then they gave me the Cytotec in my cheek, and they waited whatever period of time before they turned their Pitocin. That's what it's called. The Pitocin is what makes your your contractions come. Hope I wasn't saying that wrong. They didn't turn the epidural off. They kept that on, but they turned the Pitocin off and gave me a break, let me eat and all that. But when I went to eat, I was nauseous. And I think I was nauseous because I hadn't eaten very much food at all. And at this point, in probably like 48 hours, because I didn't eat much that day, considering I was going to be laboring. And then I had no food since the previous night. And I think I had, my blood sugars were in the normal range, but they were low for me, like 60s and 70s, like high 60s and 70s. So I think I was nauseous from that. So when they finally said I could eat, that's when first they gave me a clear fluids tray, and I had like the sugar-free Jello, and it immediately made me nauseous. And then when I got my regular food, which was toast, bacon, and I think I think it was yogurt. I can't remember. We go back and check the vlog, and you'll see. I was too nauseous to eat any of it, and I was so disappointed because I was hungry, and I was too nauseous to eat it. Um, so that was like the only eventful thing that happened. But then they turned the Pitocin back on, and then went through to the evening, and that's when I finally got to like 4.5. And then all that stuff happened with the epidural, right? So then after that finally calms down, by then it's like maybe 2 something in the morning, something like that, really late. And I'm scared to go to sleep because of the whole thinking I was gonna die thing. But finally I have, started to relax a little bit. And they came and checked me, and they said, oh, okay, we think you're at 5. So I was thinking, like, finally something's happening. And then the contractions were starting to get kind of regular. No, they were still not super regular. I was like, yes, thank you. So finally, I go to sleep. So now this is Saturday night going into Sunday. So wake up early Sunday morning, and let me say that when they turned the epidural back on, it was never as good as the first one because probably from me being scared, and they had probably started to wear off a little bit. And like I said, that drip just kind of keeps you where you are. So I was still feeling my contractions a little, just a teeny bit, not a lot. Like I still was able to go to sleep. So when they check me in the morning, I am like so optimistic. I'm like, this is gonna be it. I have to be at like a 9 or 10 because if I was at like a 5, and it's been like this been like 4 or 5 hours, I might be it. I'm like, right. I'm not saying this out loud, but this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, yes, finally. So when they go to check me, I'm like expecting good news. And then again, the doctor comes. None of my doctors are on duty that day on the Sunday. And I'm just like, what the F? Like, this was the whole point of me seeing different doctors throughout the pregnancy, which was part of my stress because the different doctors would have slightly different approaches, which would then stress me out especially toward the end where it was like week to week. So like, I'm kind of annoyed. Like none of my doctors are here, and that's the whole point. So this new doctor comes in, and she checks me, and she's like 4.5. She's like four, maybe 4.5. So now I'm upset. I'm like, they said 5 last night, and she's like, well, yeah, I could give you 5. So when they check you for dilation, it's manual. They're putting their hand in. So different doctors' hand size is different, and probably the way their perspective is different. So she was like, so basically, she made me feel like nothing had happened. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm upset again. Now, mind you, I had already been I had already been starting to feel down because it was taking long and missing my son. Then the whole death by epidural part where I was actively crying. And then from that point on, I was still just kind of weepy, like hard to hold back tears. So she's like, no progress. I'm just like, what? I'm so upset. And then that was, oh my gosh, what time? You guys got to go back and look at the vlog for the times. So I'm already starting to forget things, which is why I wanted to do this live today. But it was maybe like 8. I think like 8 o'clock, 8 something. And the nurses had just changed shifts. There was a new nurse, and now there's a new doctor. And so, like I told you, with every new doctor, they're going over the history. So she's going over all my history, and then she's going over everything that had happened, and now, pushing, past 36 hours since I've been there. And so she starts pushing for a C-section. She's not saying I have to have a C-section, but she's just like, you might want to consider a C-section. You've been here all these hours. You have been on now the Pitocin twice. The first time I had got on it, it got all the way up to 26 when they turned it off. It only goes to 30. This time I was back on it, it was already past 20. And she was like, and you're still technically not in what we call active labor. My contractions were still not regular, and I still wasn't, hadn't dilated much. And she's like, you have a history of the shoulder dystocia, the baby getting stuck. You have a history of hemorrhage. The longer you're on Pitocin, the more likely you are to hemorrhage. We're not seeing much progress. We do have the C-section option. So now I am like, I can't even hold back the tears at this point. I'm just like crying. And I'm like, well, do I have to decide right now? She says, no, you don't have to decide right now. weekend, she said, the baby is fine. She's not having any distress, so we can keep going. Oh, also, they had broke my water at some point. My water had been now broke over 12 hours, which I don't know what the mark is. In my mind, I was thinking if I got to 12 hours after my water broke, that they would force a C-section, but it might be 24 hours because I know your risk of infections and stuff increased the longer your water broke and the baby's not out. But my temperature was good. Like everything was good except no progress. So she was like, okay, so we can wait like 4 more hours and then decide. So she leaves, and I just can't even get it together. Like I'm just crying. Like I could not calm down. And then so my cousin is like rubbing my arm. The nurse, and then this is the nurse who I said, I honestly have wondered, like, was this a real nurse or was this an angel? Like, did God send me my own angel? Because she was so amazing. And I wish I wrote down her last name. Her name was Nikki. And so she's like, listen, all that. And so Nikki is saying to me, like, everything that's happened doesn't matter because Nikki's here. You've not had me. I just got here. I've not worked all weekend and now I'm here and we're gonna get this baby out. And she's like saying all this optimistic stuff, like she's magic, and I'm just like, whatever, lady. Like, I'm just not believing her at this point. Like things are going so wrong. And when I was crying about the C-section possibility, I was crying for two reasons. But the overwhelming reason was I didn't want them to have to increase this epidural because I was terrified it was going to kill me. And I said, well, if I have to, so that was one of the questions I asked the nurse. If I have to have the C-section, do they have to do a new epidural? And she says, nope, they don't have to. They use what's in there. They have to do a new bolus, and I was like terrified of that, feeling like I was going to be able to breathe again. Um, that and then C-section meant staying in the hospital longer, being away from baby Joy Chaser longer. I've never been away from him up until going to have the baby. I had never been away from him for 24 full hours. Maybe like 18 hours. Like I left in the evening and came back in the next afternoon. I'd never been away from him for a full day. So to be away from him for days was just awful for me. Probably was worse for me than him. But that was so, like C-section means even longer in the hospital. And he might kill me with the epidural. So I was crying, 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 like very, very, very upset. And my cousin is like rubbing my arm and she's like, okay. She's like, it's gonna be okay. She said, she said, we've been praying. And however you want this labor to go, however you want it to go is how it's gonna go. I remember her saying that to me. And she's like, because we've been praying. So I knew we'd been praying, but it was a lot of people praying for me at that exact time because I had so when the doctor left and I finally calmed down a little bit, I text, my brother and my sister-in-law, and I text my family in Maryland, and I was like, rough night. I'm okay, but rough, really rough night. They're talking potential C-section, so please keep praying. So I had all my family in Maryland was praying for me, and then I had my brother, who's a pastor, and his family all praying for me. And then I didn't know this, but then my cousin, she was praying, but I didn't know she had texted her sorority friends who know me, her sorors, and they were all praying for me. So there's a lot of people praying for me at that same time, which is further reason like maybe that's why God sent this lady Nikki, who maybe she was really an angel in disguise. Because I think the Bible says, we can be walking around with angels anyway at any time. So she's like, okay, so this is what we're gonna do. She's like, we're gonna, I'm gonna give you. So first thing she did was she gave me that peanut ball between my legs. And I had had that between my legs before and it did nothing. But when she put it between my legs, she like pulled me over and was like, now lean all the way over, where I was actually kind of uncomfortable because I feel like I could fall forward. But she was like, okay, right there, hold yourself there. And then she had me lay that way for like 30 minutes. Then she came back and she had me switch sides to the other side for like another 30 minutes. And she would like push me over and like help position me because I couldn't really move that much because of the epidural. But she like really positioned me and she's like, okay, I'll be back. And then she would leave. And then she tilted the bed up, which I didn't know they could do this. I'm like, why didn't anybody else do this stuff? They tilted the bed up to like a chair almost. And then they had me sit way on the edge to where it's hard to explain. So if those of you who've been in a hospital bed, especially like one of these labor ones where the bottom part kind of comes off or gets pushed to the side, the space between like where you sit and where your legs are. I'm sitting on a recliner chair right now. So actually, let me see. So you see kind of like where the my feet are and then this part of the chair. She had me scooch up to where my butt was like down here. and and I'm sitting up, so that basically gravity is pulling everything down. This is the closest I could have probably got to a squatting position with an epidural. And then she had my feet like my heels together and my knees out, so kind of like a diamond, right? And she was like, I think she left me that way for almost an hour. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was getting very uncomfortable. So finally, like I pushed the thing for her to come back, and then I'm starting to feel like all this pressure, in my vagina and my rectum. And then they put me back on my side on the peanut ball, and I'm trying to sleep. I'm kind of in and out of sleeping, and this went on. So this was for like another 4 hours to around 12. And then around 12, I was just feeling awful because I was feeling so just drained and sad and tired and anxious and worried. And now I feel these contractions still a little bit. And then I'm feeling all this pressure in my vagina and my rectum. When I had baby Joy Chicks, that epidural was so good. I did not feel anything at all, except for I had one little spot in my back that I could feel a little bit. This time, I was feeling all this pressure. I mean, a tremendous amount of pressure. And then I started feeling nauseous. And so then I was like, okay. And she was like, I was like, can they check me? She was like, yeah, let's check you. And I was like, I'm feeling a lot of pressure. And she's like, oh, yeah, you're probably dilated. She was so upbeat and peppy. And I was just so pessimistic at this point. I was just thinking, like, there's no way. Like, at this point, I had already, in my mind, thought that nothing was going to work. Um, and so they checked me and they were like, you're at 9. And I was so happy, but I was so shocked. Um, oh, wait, I wasn't nauseous yet. No, she was like, I was just like having no pressure. She was like, yeah, she said, well, we got to wait till 10. She was like, so just hang in there. And, you know, I was feeling the pressure with the contractions. That's how I knew I was still having them because I could feel the pressure. And at this point, now all of a sudden the contractions are regular and they're frequent. They're like I felt like they were like every minute or sometimes less than a minute. And then she's like, okay, when you feel the pressure in your rectum and in your vagina in between the contractions, call me back. So I'm like, okay. So then I find, at some point I'm just like so uncomfortable. Like this is just so uncomfortable. Like it is weird, and I guess this is when they say like you kind of forget the pains of labor because I don't really remember how I don't remember it hurting like sharp pains or anything. It was just so much pressure. It was like just an intense discomfort. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to call her back. And I'm like, please, please, please be at 10. And then when she's on her way in, I'm suddenly feeling like I'm going to throw up. So I have to ask for the the bag. And they had given me anti-nausea medicine previously, like the day before when I was nauseous. So they're like, we can give you some again if we need to, but I think we all just forgot about that because then they checked me and they were like, okay, you're at 10. I was like, thank God. But then they were like, but the baby is still really high up. So they said, so you could try, we might want to have you labor down. I was like, what is that? And they said, well, that's just when you breathe through the contractions instead of pushing. And in my head, I was like, F that. Like, I'm pushing because I'm already scared. My overall fear from knowing that I was pregnant was the baby being stuck. So if it's time to push, like, I want to push and get this baby out. So I was like, but I can push. They said, yeah, you can try and push, oh my gosh, when it was time to push, I pushed like like my life, like a life depended on it, which in my mind it did, because I was like, I gotta get this baby out. And I don't know how many pushes. I feel like it was like, I don't know, maybe I feel like it was like 6 or 7 pushes, but it had to be more because they said I was pushing for 30 minutes. Um, and then and I told them another thing I advocated. I told them in the beginning, I said, with everything happening with my son, he had to be taken to the side immediately. I said, but if everything goes well, I want to cut the cord myself. So I did get to cut the cord, and I thought my cousin got video of that, and now I'm realizing if she did, I don't think I added it to the vlog. So I have to go back and look for that. And if so, I'll just upload it later if I find it. And it's probably in my phone memory somewhere in my downloads. But so they were like, push, push. And then I asked for the mirror. Um, but I still feel like I couldn't really see. Like I could kind of see what they were saying. Um, but I didn't see, like, at one point they were like, oh, I could kind of feel like her head was there and I could feel like some hair when I put my hand down here. And then they were like, okay, push again. And I pushed like as hard as I could, and then they were like, "Okay, grab her," and I was able to like pull her up myself, um, which is crazy. Like that was like an amazing. So like I did get that amazing moment of like like seeing her for the first time, and she's cried right away. She was like pissed off. She was mad, and then they laid her down, and her cord was short. So they're like, oh, cord's kind of short, so they like might be a little tricky, but they like angled the scissors in a way I could reach down and like cut the cord myself. Um, and then they just kept her on my chest. And now here's where it was kind of terrible again, right? So remember, this epidural doesn't work as well as before. So with baby Joy Chaser, when they took him out and then they whisked him to the side because he didn't cry right away. And then he starts crying and they kept him over there. And I'm like, what's wrong? Why isn't he is he okay? And they're like, oh yeah, he's fine. They said, oh, you're just having some bleeding. So that's why they didn't bring him over. So this time, these doctors, I don't know if it was because they were prepared for the bleeding already, but they never took her away. They let her stay on my chest. But I could feel the blood pouring out of me. Like I could feel it like running out of my vagina, like across my rectum. And like a it felt like a hose, like when you kind of turn it on but not high, but just a constant pouring of blood. Like I could feel that, and I was thinking like, oh my gosh. And then they're getting the placenta out, which I don't remember that hurting or anything. And then they're shoving their hands in my vagina to like, I don't even know exactly what they were doing. I think they were putting sponges in or something to absorb. I'm not entirely sure, so I could be wrong. But that's in my mind, that's what they were doing. But I felt like I could feel this lady shoving her arm in my vagina and this blood pouring out. And I'm like, like, oh, I could feel like it didn't hurt, but it was just, again, all this pressure, which I guess the epidurals just don't take the pressure away. But that pressure is intense. And then I was like praying, like, please let this stop. Like, I'm happy that I'm holding the baby. And they're like, okay, so they're telling me, they're like, okay, got a lot of, you have a, you're hemorrhaging quite a bit here, but you're okay. They said, but if you start to feel faint, you have like make sure you tell us. And I never felt faint or anything. I didn't see any little stars or anything crazy, but it felt like forever before they finally were like, okay, it's stopping. The blood is stopping. And then they were like, I remember them saying 12 sponges. I remember the number was 12. And then my cousin ended up telling me later she works for an insurance company, like a big one, and so she's aware of like some different malpractice things. And she was like, yeah, they always count the sponges because they have to make sure that they take out everything that they put in when they're working on a person. Um, yes, I think that is, yeah, Rachel Faye says they were removing to see if there were any remaining placenta. Yeah, like I know they were, that sounds about right. And I don't think that there was any, but it was just the fact that I could feel it. And I kept saying, like, I could feel that. I could feel that. Like, I wanted them to give me more numbing medication, but they didn't give me anything. I think they were just moving so fast, you know. Rachel says any remaining placenta causes bleeding. Yeah, and then part of the bleeding too is they were saying just from being on the Pitocin that long, like I was basically on Pitocin for 48 hours. And the Pitocin makes your uterus contract. So by the time you have the baby, your uterus is like, I'm done. Like it's too tired to contract. So then they had to give me another medicine to make it contract. And then that's the same medicine they gave me before Baby Joy Chaser that makes you have diarrhea. Um, Now this time, I think because it's just different doctors, right? So these doctors wanted me to stay in recovery longer than the previous time. So because I'm in recovery, they don't want me standing up yet. So now the diarrhea comes, and I have to use a bedpan, which I never had to use a bedpan in my life. Very, very humbling experience. And like again, the nurses were so good, and this was the same nurse. Her name was Nikki, and she was like, "Oh, it's no big deal," And they make you feel like try to make you feel less embarrassed about it, and then like having to be like cleaned up by another person after going to the bathroom. All very, very humbling experience, but the baby was out and she was perfect. Through all of those ups and downs during the labor and delivery, only one time was there any issue with the baby, and that was during one of the times where they used the catheter to empty my bladder. For whatever reason, she didn't like it that time, and her heart rate, I think I don't remember honestly if it dropped temporarily or if it sped up temporarily, but whatever it did, it was very, very, um, very short and went back to normal quickly. And they said that happens sometimes. Sometimes the babies don't like when we empty the bladder. But that only happened one time after all those bladder emptying times. So throughout everything, she was fine, and then she was perfect. She came out 7 pounds 2 ounces. Came out screaming and mad, and it was all good. All the issues were just with me. So it was a traumatic labor again. I feel like it was the opposite of Baby Joy Chaser. His was a very boring labor and a traumatic and long delivery. Hers was a very traumatic labor and then a very fast delivery and then a little bit of a scary at the end of delivery, but not too bad. Like I didn't think I was gonna die from the hemorrhaging though. Like I just wanted it to stop because like you just being aware the blood is pouring out of you is not a good thing. But I knew like they could give me blood. You know what I mean? And that they were going to give me medicine to stop it. Like I wasn't thinking like that was going to kill me. But the whole being numb up past my chest, awful. I did see some comments that I missed while I was talking. Course correction says it's definitely a systemic issue and they need to address it in the training of the staff. You can call the ombudsman for the hospital and make a suggestion. You know what? Thank you for that. I didn't know who to contact about that. Um, I have my 6 week postpartum coming up, and I plan to complain about the care because I feel very, very disappointed that there was no doctors there from my office. And I learned that the main doctor, who was my favorite doctor before, was actually the person who started the practice, and she's now retired. So I'm feeling like maybe the level of care has decreased since she retired. Because when I had baby Joy Chaser, there was a doctor on staff from my office the entire time. And then when I was in postpartum, the doctor who retired came to see me in postpartum and check me out. I never saw anyone from the practice after I had the baby. So I'm just not happy with them, and I plan to share that because that's the main reason that I was willing to deal with the annoyance of seeing a different doctor each time, to make sure that I met everybody so it wouldn't be strangers. And it was still strangers. And I feel like had there been a doctor from my practice on there from the beginning, that they would have said, oh, if the cytotech, if she dilated to 3 because of that balloon, just put the cytotech in her mouth from Friday. And I probably could have had the baby sooner, and maybe that whole epidural thing wouldn't have happened because the nurse agreed too that they think the cytotech probably is what changed the game because that's what's really softened up the cervix to allow that plus the put me in those positions. Like that's really what was the clincher. But even if I hadn't had that medicine to soften the cervix, it wouldn't have mattered what position I was in. It wouldn't have made any difference that fast because you could walk around being 3 centimeters dilated and for weeks. That's not ideal, but that does happen. Some women just are just dilated toward the end of pregnancy because they've had a baby before and the weight of the pregnancy is just causing them to dilate. But as long as they're not in labor or leaking fluids, you know. So, another traumatic labor and delivery. I still feel kind of how I felt after baby Joy Chaser. Like after him, I felt cheated. Like I felt like I didn't get that moment where they lay the baby on your chest and it's like that sense of relief that you see on TV, and you see on other on videos. Not even like it's fake, but on people's actual labor videos. For baby sister, I do feel like I got that because I remember the moment she came out, and I do remember feeling that relief because I could feel like when it was pushing her, I guess like that ring of fire they call it. I felt that like it didn't burn, but it hurt, and as I remember saying out loud, like oh, like this hurts, like oh my gosh, like this hurts. And I know I was much more probably like vocal about the pain of pushing than with him. Because with him, it didn't hurt. I was just tired. With her, it hurt. Like I felt it, and I could. It hurt, and I remember thinking like I cannot imagine how much more painful that would have been without the epidural at all. So even though the epidural, I felt like it was going to kill me, even though the nurse said it really wasn't. Um, I still am glad I had it because that was a lot of pain. I am not a fan of pain, and I cannot imagine how much more painful that would have been without the epidural at all. Um, so in hindsight, there's nothing that I really would have done different other than once I knew they were supposed to be checking that epidural, every time they checked anything on my body, I was like, can you check the epidural? And they would check my back. So that's the only thing I would do different is if I would have known about making sure your epidural line gets checked at least every 4 hours, I would have been reminding them. but I would still get the epidural again. And yeah, so that's kind of how it went. And then I went over to the postpartum room where I still had the diarrhea for like that whole day. But it wasn't as intense and by then I was allowed to walk around. So I didn't need a bedpan again. And the other play area where I say I advocated for myself is I told them I didn't want to see the lactation people. And I talked about that in the vlog about how when I had baby Joy Chaser, they, made me feel bad for asking for formula because when he didn't drink for a day and also had no dirty diapers, um, I didn't want to deal with that. So I told every nurse I don't want the lactation people, to the point where they actually put a sign on my door, no lactation. And none of them came. So I'm proud of myself for advocating for what I wanted in terms of the blood sugar checks and the lactation consultants. So um, that's pretty much how it went. And I got that, the beautiful moment of putting the baby on my chest. I got that this time, but I still feel like I got kind of cheated out of like what could have been just a more peaceful experience. Like, no one should have to think that they're going to die when they're just having a baby. I mean, people have babies all the time, and it's 2022. Like, we shouldn't be afraid of dying from that. Um, you know, but the statistics are what the statistics are, and I was very scared during the epidural incident. I did have to get, I did not get a episiotomy, but I did have a 2-degree tear. So we had to do some stitches, which I also felt. It's just weird. Like, I didn't feel any sharp pain, so it's not like I felt the needle, but it almost felt like I felt like the thread. It was just weird what I could and could not feel with the epidural. So it definitely was not like before with baby Joy Teaser where I just felt nothing. Like, I could definitely feel things going on. It just took away the majority. It took away any and all sharp pains and most of the edge off. But I could feel anything that felt like tugging or pulling or pressure. I felt. So it was just, I don't know. That's my experience. I hope this has been helpful. And like I said, I put the trigger warning in the beginning because I don't want. I know when I was looking up vlogs for people giving birth at 37 weeks, because I was nervous about how is the baby going to be. Would she need a NICU stay? And she's perfect. She didn't need any of that. And even with the gestational diabetes, they were testing her blood sugars by pricking her foot like every 3 to 4 hours, and she passed every single one. So um, she just handled being born wonderfully. All the issues were with me. Um, yeah, and I forgot what I was going to say about that. But oh, I was saying that when I knew I was going to deliver probably at 37 weeks, I was nervous about if she would need a NICU stay or whatnot, and so I was looking up people's labor and delivery vlogs at 37 weeks, and I I purposely was watching the ones where it said like a positive story, a good outcome in the title, because I didn't want to watch anything that was going to scare me. So I did put a trigger warning at the beginning of this video. Like, this is not a video for somebody who's, about to go into labor and want something to watch to be reassuring. Even though, like, I'm fine now, baby's fine. Um, but I wouldn't want them to be worried. But this is definitely someone who wants to know, like, what it can really be like, what can really happen. This is more of a video for for those people or people curious, just they like to watch labor and delivery vlogs or labor and delivery stories. So I'm trying to see if any other comments that I missed. Let my own doctors know they need to address a training issue. Yes. And then Rachel was just talking about removing the placenta. So that's how it went. Was I don't know if I missed anything. I'm trying to remember. But that's why I did the vlog and the story. The story is more, I guess, like just me share my thoughts about what was happening and like my thoughts kind of after the fact versus in the moment. So you get both. Um, so definitely go check out the vlog if you haven't already. And she's still over there sleeping, making noise. I'm gonna have to wake her up soon because we have to go get baby Joy Chaser from school. So I need to like change her, feed her, and pray that she's not cranky in the car. She doesn't. Sometimes she's very cranky in the car seat, but she's getting big fast. I already had to adjust the shoulder straps to the second setting. Like, oh, she's growing quick. So anyway, any questions or anything before I sign off, guys? Thank you for joining me for the vlog or for the live stream, I should say. Um, I think I see 7 people watching. I have 3 likes. I would love it if I got 4 more likes to match how many people were watching. And I'm like, okay, what emoji should we put for anybody who watched up to this point? Put a. Is there an angel? Is there an angel emoji? Oh, can't even comment. I can't comment on my phone while I'm on here. If there's a name, I think there's an angel emoji. Please use that for like, and that'll represent just blessed. I feel very blessed that despite how my perception of things, everything worked out with the labor and delivery, and we both have no issues. Rachel Faith asks, "How is breastfeeding?" Breastfeeding is a challenge. It's hard for me to know when my milk came in. A very similar experience to Baby Joy Chaser, except they have different personalities already. So, oh, here comes Buttercup. I've been waiting for her. She usually shows up. Hey, Butters. She usually shows up for all my lives, all my videos. Um, so both babies latched really well and nursed really well the first day. And then the second day, um, so the second day with baby Joy Chaser, he just got mad because I think it was not enough colostrum coming out and milk hadn't come in. And he just got pissed off. So he would like suck twice. And then I remember he would just scream and his face would get so red and then he would not latch back on. It was suck twice, scream all day. With her, she doesn't get mad. She just sucks harder. So she just kept sucking and sucking and sucking. And then the problem with her, or the challenge, is because she's born at 37 weeks, she gets tired. And so she would suck and then she would fall asleep on the breast. So she would suck twice, fall asleep. So I have to blow in her face, play with her ears. Sometimes I have to like tickle her leg or something to keep her nursing. And even now at almost 5 weeks, she still falls asleep very quickly on the breast. And the milk doesn't come out as fast. So we actually, and I need to do another video on this. So we actually ended up in the ER um, on her 4th day home. Yeah, she was 6 days old. Because they were like, so I made it through my whole hospital stay with just one breast, no formula, which was already an achievement from Baby Joy Chaser. And they were like, with each day, the number of wet diapers should increase. Now she was having poopy diapers. And sometimes you can't tell if it was wet because the poop is there and it was like the meconium or whatever. But when it got to the third day, it was like no wet diapers. And then on the fourth day, it should have been four. And I'm like, well, we didn't even get to three. So I had made up my mind that if it got to be 7 in the morning, which was 24 full hours from the last diaper, which was a poop one, not even a wet one, that I would call the doctor. And so when I called the doctor, they were like, okay, take her to the ER. She might be dehydrated. And so I took her, and of course, while we're in the ER, she peed, and then she peed again while we were in the room. So she was technically not dehydrated, but they said the fact that it was only hadn't been any wet diapers in 24 hours did mean she probably wasn't getting enough milk from me. So the combination of her not staying awake and being and sucking sufficiently because she wasn't awake long enough, plus me just not making a lot. And yes, I had started pumping and not much was coming out, but it was a little bit coming out, but not much at all. I think in the hospital when I pumped for 20 minutes and there was like nothing. Nothing came out. Like a little bit of colostrum. Maybe it wasn't 20 minutes, but a little bit of like sticky colostrum was on my nipple, but nothing actually came out into the pump. Um, and then I think by the time I got home, it did a little bit came out. Yeah, like a little bit. And so now most of the time when I pump, it's um almost 2 ounces each time, but that's not a whole lot. So anyway, with the whole dehydration incident, they said, they weren't concerned because she had started peeing again and they felt I was definitely making some milk, but probably not a whole lot. And between her being a sleepy baby and me being not a great producer, they recommended that I supplement. So now I am pumping a few times a day. She does nurse and latch on, and sometimes she stays awake longer than others. And then she's getting formula in the bottle. So with the bottle, they just suck it down so fast. There's no time to go to sleep with your when you're nursing. They gotta like work at it. So they be sucking, 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 and getting little bits. And then instead of keeping it up, she just falls asleep. Um, so breastfeeding is a challenge once again, but for a slightly different reason. Because at least she will nurse. Baby Joy Chaser would not nurse at all. So I had to pump all the time. At least I can have her nurse, and then I feel like we do each boob and like top off with some formula, and then I will still try to pump throughout the day because then at least sometimes instead of topping off with formula, I'm topping off with a bottle of breast milk. So breastfeeding not easy, but baby is being fed, and that's what matters. Yep, that's what Rachel just said. Best fed baby is FED baby fed. So if you have to give her formula, so be it. Yes. Yeah, she'll be fine. I mean, I baby Joy Chaser is perfect and amazing and super smart and very healthy. So I credit that to both. Like he got the formula that he needed and he also got some of that good old breast milk. But I had to pump and I did it for 8 months. So we'll see how long I do it with her. I should be going back to work at around 6 months, and I'm in a new position now as supervisor. And then I don't even know where lactation room is now because they kind of did away with the area they had been using. So I have to find a new area. So, that'll be some different logistics I'll be facing when it's time to go back to work. So I'll decide on how long I'll pump and nurse. I'm just gonna play by ear and try to not be. I'm definitely trying to not take things so seriously this time. Like it's serious, you make sure your baby eats, but like I know she's eating. I know she'll be fine. So things aren't always gonna be according to plan, and I can be okay with that. Like try to not. This cat is kneading on me. Look at this. So distracting. And that's baby Joy Chaser's blanket, Buttercup. But yeah, I'm just trying to take it, be less hard on myself. I think I was more hard on myself with him because it was, um I don't know, I think it was just more disappointing and more frustrating that he wouldn't nurse at all. She would nurse and stay on my boob all day. But then she just be using it as a pacifier. Like she suck a few times and feel uncomfortable and go to sleep, but then she want to keep the nipple in her mouth. I'm like, no, I gotta do stuff. Um, oh, but I did buy. Oh, I don't have it over here. I have the motor part. I did buy. I don't know why this says T Srete. I don't know what it's called. This is the motor for a wireless breast pump. So I bought these and they fit on top and the pieces go in your bra. And so this is now, I just got this yesterday. So this is going to let me pump even more because I can pump while I'm doing other stuff, which that's been the challenge because she'll want to be being held. So sometimes it's hard to be holding. That's one of the biggest challenges to pumping, especially as a single mom by choice. It's not like I can pass her off to somebody else to feed her while I pump. So it's like right boob, left boob, bottle. Hopefully get her to fall asleep or be willing to be put down and then I can pump. It's a lot. So I'm definitely not pumping probably as much as I should, but I'm gonna be kicking it up a notch because I got the wireless pump now, and it's not as good as I'm using the Motif the most. I have the Spectra down here, but my cords keep coming out. I have to order new tubing, because they keep coming loose. But either way, baby is good. I'm gonna see if I can show you her, because I need to wake her up anyway, and we shall see. She's sleeping in this little pack and play bassinet area. Wakey wakey. Yeah, you gotta wake up to eat. You gotta wake up to eat because we gotta go get big brother. I think she's getting chunky and big and tall. I think she looks way bigger. You gonna wake up and say hi to the people? Sleepy face. Oh, and I think we got a stinky booty over here too. I think we got a stinky booty. Let's see. So people think she looks like my mom. I do think she looks like me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that does look like my face, but smaller. You gonna wake up? You hiding your face? Yeah, she's ready to nurse now. All right, guys. Thank you for watching my very long labor and delivery story. The main takeaway is that mom and baby are healthy and well. And it was a rough ride, but she made it. We're on the other side of it, and look, she's ready. She's ready to nurse now. I don't know if you can hear that sniffing that they do, like they're trying to smell you out. It's funny. All right, thanks guys. Please put the angel emoji in the comments of the main video to let me know that you watched. And thank you all. Talk to you later. Bye.